For a guy whose job description is literally crime fighter, Batman sure does spend an awful lot of time fighting other superheroes. His gallery of rogues is frequently called one of the best cast of villains available to any comic book character. You think having an entire asylum full of homicidal clowns, living refrigerators, and the occasional immortal bioterrorist would keep him busy? Seriously, this is a guy who fought the entire Justice League to a standstill by himself. Not once, but twice. And the first time, he didn't even mean to. As you might imagine, being the type of person who can accidentally defeat the world's greatest superheroes has given Batman a pretty strong track record against his fellow heroes. So get ready to be reminded why Batman has so few friends as we look at 7 powerful superheroes Batman has beaten. At number 7, The Punisher. Now, of all the Marvel crossovers Batman has appeared in, this one felt like one of the more organic ones to have the characters play off each other. Batman is a hero who lives by a code and who prides himself on not sinking to the level of the criminals he hurts. The Punisher can become nearly indistinguishable from the criminals he hunts, utilizing torture and lethal weapons to meet his goals to the point that many question if he can even be viewed as a hero. I mean, they contrast so well that putting them together is natural tension. Though they've worked together in crossovers, they are way too ideologically different to set aside their grudge. Both times, it came to blows at the end of their working arrangement. Now, in the Deadly Nights story, the Punisher gets a punch in on Batman and proves he doesn't have Batman's one-punch knockout power. When the second punch comes, Batman tosses the Punisher aside and informs him the first shot is the only free one he'll get. The Punisher chooses to back down rather than carry on the altercation. Now, the more decisive encounter between the two came in the prequel story, Lake of Fire. The Batman of this story was actually the Nightfall iteration of Azrael, so you'd think maybe he'd get along a little better with the Punisher, but if anything, it's worse. And the Punisher is totally confused by it, just like in Deadly Nights, because he truly can't see how him and any iteration of Batman are on different sides. But this alliance also came to blows, and after Azrael's suit proved bulletproof, the Punisher began taking damage and explicitly realized that he couldn't win this fight. Left with no alternative, the Punisher used one of the John Paul Valley Batman smoke bombs to distract his opponent and retreat. Coming in at number 6, The Hulk. Now, battles between Marvel and DC characters are always going to be contentious, but when you introduce a character like the Hulk into the equation, people are definitely expecting shenanigans for the Incredible One to suffer defeat. The Hulk has battered around gods like Thor and Loki, so obviously Batman would have no chance in a straight-up fight. But this is one case where Batman's prep time is totally understandable, since anyone who goes against the Hulk without a strategy is just asking to lose. Rather than try to overpower the Hulk, Batman utilized chemicals in the air that would render the Hulk unconscious if he inhaled them. The Hulk is no idiot though, and just attempted to hold his breath to avoid defeat, something he can do for far, far longer than any normal human. But sometimes you just can't help but lose your breath, like when Batman kicks you in the gut. Yeah, that one's gotta hurt. Once the chemicals got in the Hulk's lungs, he went down for a nap and left Batman standing tall. Coming in at number 5, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, of all the heroes Batman has come across, the Ninja Turtles would have to be one of the more bizarre crossovers to imagine, and actually it's one of my personal favorites. But the story actually holds up pretty well, playing off the contrast of Batman's seriousness and the more lighthearted nature of the Turtles, and of course, as it is pretty much tradition, whenever heroes cross paths for the first time, they had to have a fight due to a misunderstanding. You'd think Batman would be at a disadvantage in a 4-against-1 confrontation, but even with very little knowledge about his opponents, Batman was just far better equipped and trained. The Turtles got the worst of the brief scuffle, being thrown about and knocked around until Splinter broke things up with a smoke bomb. But as these things tend to go, the heroes didn't hold a grudge, and the Turtles actually wound up admiring Batman for how skilled he was at fighting. Coming in at number 4, Spawn. Now, back in the 90s, when Spawn was still a big enough deal to mention alongside big-name characters, there was a brief crossover between him and the Dark Knight. I mean, it was the typical heroes crossover that tried to be the best of both worlds by first having the characters fight and indulge the fantasy of seeing who was better, and later teaming up to stop a common threat together. It wasn't that memorable and oddly featured a Batman more prone to name-calling, particularly referring to Spawn as a twit. And in a feud that saw the characters behaving as childishly as they did, Batman would likely take that as a win. Sure, Batman got hit about as hard as he dished it out, but only Spawn wound up with a lasting effect from this encounter. The issue ended with Batman getting in one last cheap shot on Spawn, flinging a batarang in his opponent and ally's face. The wound actually carried over into the main Spawn series, where his face was now stitched up with the shoelace. They eventually tried to retcon the origin of the scar, but we all knew who put it on Spawn's face. Coming in at number 3, Superman. Now, these two have fought so many times that you knew it was going to be on here, but we're probably just unsure which story we'd be going with. Batman fought Superman in Hush when he was under Poison Ivy's control, but he more survived that fight than won it. And of course, they fought in the immensely popular Dark Knight Returns, and people would debate who actually won that fight since Batman wound up getting what he wanted, but he was also the one buried in the ground. I mean, temporarily. Yes, the movie was extremely polarizing for many viewers, but we're not here to talk about who liked it or disliked it. This is about the outcome, and this time, Bruce's gadgets prevailed. Coming in at number 2, the Justice League. Now, speaking of Batman losing friends, this little incident is a classic example. I mean, we all know Batman likes to have contingency plans for everything, like some ever-useful shark repellent spray. But most heroes limit their defense plans to their enemies. Batman is so guarded that he had strategies mapped out for taking out his own friends. And worse yet, those plans were actually put into action, taking out the entire Justice League all at once. Each member of the Justice League was subjected to their biggest weaknesses: fire against Martian Manhunter, liquid nitrogen to freeze Plastic Man, Aquaman being made aquaphobic, Green Lantern getting blinded by his own ring, a Vibra bullet inducing seizures against the Flash, Wonder Woman getting trapped in virtual reality against an unbeatable opponent, and Superman rendered helpless by red kryptonite. And at number 1, Captain America. This is yet another Marvel hero to fall before Batman, and an Avenger at that. The original Avenger. It won't be the last Marvel mention on the list either. But yes, long before Captain America was shocking and outraging comic fans on the internet by hailing Hydra, he had a little run-in against Batman during the DC vs. Marvel Comics crossover event in the 90s. And as if these two opposing sides doing battle wasn't enough, readers got to vote on the outcome of many of the fights, meaning Batman has a fans to thank for this victory. Although it was hardly a resounding triumph, Batman and Captain America were so evenly pitted against each other that neither was able to gain the advantage they needed to put the fight away. Their battle stretched across hours and looked like it wouldn't be slowing down. It was only their choice of battleground that gave Batman the win. Having wound up fighting in a sewer when the system began flushing, Cap was distracted long enough to be hit by a batarang and knocked in. Of course, Batman is not a killer, so seeing that Captain America was on the verge of drowning, he rescued his adversary to put an end to the fight.